Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to tackle something I bet a lot of you have been thinking about.
Yeah.
What is going on with American support for Israel,
Right.
especially among evangelical Christians?
Mm-hmm.
We've got some really interesting stuff to dive into today.
Yeah.
We've got some audio excerpts from Al Jazeera's From Washington
Okay.
program. We've also got a report from Al Jazeera Plus
Interesting.
and commentary from experts like Jonathan Kutab.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Palestinian-American human rights activist and attorney.
Okay.
And we've also got John Zogby,
Oh, wow.
the renowned pollster.
Yeah, it really is fascinating to see how long-held beliefs about who supports Israel and why they do are being challenged today.
Yeah.
You know, especially in light of the 2023 Israel-Gaza war.
Right.
It's like watching those tectonic plates shift.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting to me is how these shifts are connecting to larger social and political trends in the U.S.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little.
Sure.
What exactly are these changes that we're talking about?
Okay.
And why should our listeners care about this?
Well, white evangelical Protestants have historically been like a major base of support for Israel,
Right.
you know, and they lean heavily Republican.
Right.
I mean, just think about it. 8 out of 10 of them voted for Trump
Wow.
in both 2016 and 2020.
Yeah.
So that's a voting bloc that politicians really pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So their support has real political weight, but what's driving it?
Yeah.
Like, why is this group so connected to Israel?
Well, you know, it goes way beyond politics for a lot of them.
Okay.
It's tied to their belief that a strong Israel is essential for fulfilling biblical prophecy, particularly, you know, beliefs about the end times.
Okay.
A lot of evangelicals believe that the gathering of Jews in Israel is like a sign that the second coming of Christ is approaching, and that supporting Israel is going to like hasten that event.
Wow. Okay.
So for them, this isn't just, you know, a political stance, it's deeply spiritual.
Okay, so historically, this group has been rock solid in their support for Israel.
Right.
But our sources are suggesting that things are changing a bit.
Yeah, exactly. The 2023 Israel-Gaza war seems to have been a turning point for a lot of people,
Okay.
including some evangelicals.
Interesting.
John Zogby's polling shows a decrease in unconditional support for Israel, especially among younger evangelicals.
Oh, wow.
It's like the horrific images from Gaza,
Right.
particularly the destruction in Christian communities in the north.
Yeah.
It forced some people to confront a new reality.
You know, it makes you wonder if seeing the human cost of the conflict so vividly, you know, through sources like Al Jazeera,
Yeah.
is making some people rethink their assumptions, even if those assumptions are rooted in, you know, really deeply held beliefs.
It's certainly possible. The interview with Chris Jones, you know, the evangelical activist,
Right.
really highlights this.
Okay.
He was really troubled by the devastation inflicted on those ancient Christian communities in Gaza.
Wow.
He saw it as a betrayal of the very people that they thought they were supporting.
That's a really powerful anecdote.
Yeah.
And it kind of points to this, you know, fascinating generational divide that seems to be emerging.
Right.
Our sources suggest that younger Americans who maybe haven't been exposed to the same narratives about the Holocaust
You're right.
that shaped older generations
Exactly.
are a lot more critical of Israeli policies.
That's right. Zogby's research indicates that younger generations are less influenced by historical narratives
Right.
and are more focused on the present-day situation.
Yeah.
Some even view Israel's actions as violent and bordering on genocide.
Those are really strong words.
Yeah.
So we've got this evangelical base, which has historically been unwavering in its support for Israel, but now we're seeing some cracks appear.
Yeah.
And those cracks seem to be driven by a combinations of factors.
Right.
The war in Gaza.
Generational shifts and maybe even evolving political alignments.
It's important to consider the political angle, too.
Okay.
You know, we've got this historical intertwining of evangelical support for Israel with the Republican Party.
Right.
And more recently, the Trump administration.
Right.
But Jonathan Kutab offers a bit of a different perspective.
Okay.
He suggests that for many evangelicals, the focus is actually more on social issues like abortion,
Oh, interesting.
and that they may not be as deeply engaged in like the nuances of Israeli policies as we might assume.
It's like he's suggesting their support for Israel might be driven more by domestic political concerns
Yeah,
than by like a deep understanding of the complexities on the ground.
exactly.
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating is Kutab's prediction
Okay.
that if U.S. interests were to shift away from Israel, that evangelical support could diminish rapidly.
Wow.
It makes you wonder, is their support for Israel truly unwavering?
Right.
Or is it contingent on other factors?
That's a really important question. Yeah.
And it gets to the heart of what we're trying to unpack here.
It definitely highlights the complexities of the issue.
Yeah.
It's not like a simple black and white situation.
Right.
There are shades of gray that, demand further exploration.
Okay, so we've got this evangelical base that's historically been incredibly supportive of Israel.
Right.
But now we're seeing cracks in that support,
Mm-hmm.
driven by a number of factors.
Yeah.
Including the war in Gaza, generational differences,
Right.
and potentially even shifts in political priorities.
Exactly.
But where do Palestinian Christians fit into all of this?
That's a crucial point that often gets overlooked.
Yeah.
Jonathan Kutab brings to light the experiences of Palestinian Christians, particularly those living in Gaza,
Okay.
and how their perspectives are often ignored in this whole discussion.
He's kind of saying, hey, we're Christians too, and our experiences matter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he highlights the irony of Israeli leaders praising evangelical support while at the same time harming Palestinian Christians.
Right.
It really reveals the complexities of the situation.
Okay, so we've established that there's a shift happening in how some American evangelicals view Israel.
Right.
But are there any organized efforts within the American church to actually advocate for Palestinian rights?
There are, although they're still a minority.
Okay.
We're seeing a growing movement within some churches to support Palestinian rights, including some who are going as far as to support the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement.
The BDS movement.
Yeah, it's a sign that the conversation is evolving, and that even within seemingly monolithic groups, there are diverse perspectives.
It's definitely a signal that things are changing.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
Right.
We've explored the historical backdrop of evangelical support for Israel, the impact of the Gaza war, the growing generational divide, and the complex interplay of political and religious beliefs.
It's a really nuanced and dynamic picture.
It is.
And it leaves us with so many questions to explore further.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it feels like we've only just scratched the surface here.
Right.
We've got this deeply held belief system that seems to be clashing with, the realities on the ground.
Yeah.
And as more information comes to light.
Right.
Especially through sources like Al Jazeera.
Yeah.
It seems like some people are, beginning to question their long-held assumptions.
It's a fascinating evolution to watch. It's almost as if people are seeing Gaza for the first time, not through the lens of prophecy, but through the eyes of the people who actually live there.
Including their fellow Christians.
Exactly. And that's where the Palestinian Christian perspective becomes so crucial, Yeah. It really challenges that idea that supporting Israel automatically means that you're supporting Christianity.
Right.
Jonathan Kutab reminds us that Palestinian Christians have been marginalized and harmed by Israeli policies, a fact that he says is often overlooked by their American counterparts.
It's a really powerful point. He's essentially saying, hey, we're Christians too.
Right.
And our experiences matter.
Exactly.
It kind of forces us to look at the complexities of this situation.
Absolutely. And it really underscores how important it is to understand this conflict beyond simplistic binaries.
Okay.
It's not just about Jews versus Muslims or Israel versus Palestine. It's about justice. It's about human rights.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity.
Okay, so, our sources have suggested that for a lot of evangelicals, this idea of the end times plays a really significant role in their support for Israel.
Right.
Can we kind of dive into that a little deeper?
Of course.
Okay.
Dina Takruri, in her report for Al Jazeera Plus, explores this connection, highlighting how some evangelicals see the establishment of Israel as a prerequisite for the second coming of Christ.
Wow.
She even shares this quote from a Christian Zionist leader.
Okay.
He says, "We see all over God's word that the Jewish people at a certain point in history would find their way back. 1948, when the state became a nation, and ever since the Jewish people have been coming home. It's a miracle, and we've been living in Bible prophecy ever since."
Okay, hold on. That's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah.
They're talking about international politics, it's like a chapter in Revelation.
Right.
What do you make of that?
It really highlights how, for some, the plight of the Palestinians might take a back seat to a larger theological framework, as Takuri points out.
Yeah.
Some evangelical organizations are actively funding Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, even though those settlements are considered illegal under international law.
So it seems like they're putting theological beliefs ahead of international law and arguably basic human rights.
It's a controversial stance for sure.
Yeah.
And it highlights the tension that can exist between religious conviction and political reality.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
If this whole end times narrative were to lose its grip, would that affect evangelical support for Israel?
That's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
For now, it seems that for many American evangelicals, support for Israel remains deeply intertwined with their faith.
Right.
And as we've discussed, that faith is often aligned with the Republican Party.
Right.
So how does this all play out in the political arena, especially with the 2024 election coming up?
Right, because American support for Israel has traditionally been a bipartisan issue. But are we seeing any cracks in that consensus?
Well, remember Zogby's point about the generational divide. That divide is playing out within the Republican Party, too. You've got younger Republicans who aren't as wedded to the traditional pro-Israel stance and are more open to criticizing Israeli policies.
So we could potentially see a realignment within the Republican base on this issue.
Possibly, and that could have significant implications for American foreign policy in the Middle East. If the Republican Party starts to fracture on the issue of Israel, it could create an opening for a more nuanced and balanced approach to the conflict.
And what about the Democrats?
Yeah.
Where do they stand on all this?
Well, the Democratic Party has traditionally been more supportive of a two-state solution and more critical of Israeli settlements. But even within the Democratic ranks, there's a growing progressive wing that's more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause and more willing to challenge Israeli policies.
Though it's not as simple as saying Democrats support Palestine and Republicans support Israel.
Not at all. There's a spectrum of views within both parties.
Yeah.
And as the political landscape continues to evolve, we're likely to see these internal debates intensify.
It really does feel like the ground is shifting here.
Yeah.
Long-held assumptions are being challenged and new alliances are forming.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And this deep dive has given you a glimpse into the complexity of this evolving landscape. We've explored the historical roots of American evangelical support for Israel, the impact of the Gaza war, the generational divide, and the interplay of political and religious beliefs.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
And it feels like there are even more questions now than when we started.
It always happens that way.
Will this shift in public opinion continue?
Right.
Will American evangelical support for Israel waver? And how will all of this impact the future of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Those are all great questions.
Yeah.
For now, the main takeaway is that the conversation about Israel and Palestine is changing. It's a conversation that demands our attention, our critical thinking, and our willingness to engage with diverse perspectives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This deep dive has provided a ton of information, but it's just the beginning.
Right.
It's up to each of us to continue exploring,
learning
and engaging with this complex and multifaceted issue.
Yeah, it's complex.
What insights have resonated with you the most?
Right.
What questions are you left with?
Remember, understanding the nuances is crucial.
Yeah.
Don't fall for oversimplifications or black and white thinking. Engage with diverse sources. Challenge your own assumptions. And be open to the possibility that the truth is more complex than you initially thought. And most importantly, keep asking questions.
Because in a world of shifting sands, informed citizens are the best navigators.
That's a powerful thought.
It is. Until next time, keep diving deep. It strikes me, as we're wrapping up this deep dive, how powerful storytelling can be.
Oh, that's so true.
When you think about the stories that we heard from Jonathan Kutab about the plight of Palestinian Christians, or Chris Jones's account of the devastation in Gaza. Those personal narratives, they really put a human face on this conflict.
They help us to see beyond the headlines and the statistics, and to really connect with the human cost of what's happening.
It's like those stories help us see beyond the, the headlines and statistics and really connect with the human cost.
Exactly. And that kind of empathy is crucial for developing a more nuanced and compassionate understanding of this issue.
But stories can be powerful in another way, too, right?
Absolutely.
Like they can shape our perceptions and even influence our beliefs.
Think about that end times narrative that Dina Takuri explored in her report.
Yeah.
It's a powerful story, that has resonated deeply with millions of American evangelicals.
Right.
And it helps explain their unwavering support for Israel.
But what if we started telling different stories? What if we started centering the experiences of Palestinians?
Okay.
Like stories that highlighted the injustices they face, stories that emphasized the shared humanity of both Israelis and Palestinians.
That's an interesting thought. It's almost like you're suggesting a narrative revolution, a shift in the stories we tell ourselves about this conflict.
Maybe I am.
Okay.
Because I think stories have the power to change hearts and minds.
Yeah, they do.
They can break down barriers, challenge assumptions, and inspire action.
It's true.
So as we move forward, as we grapple with the complexities of this issue, let's be mindful of the stories we tell and the stories we listen to.
That's a good point.
Let's seek out diverse perspectives, challenge dominant narratives and amplify the voices of those who have been marginalized.
Because the path to peace, understanding, and justice, it begins with the stories we choose to embrace.
Well said. And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the shifting sands of American support for Israel.
Yeah.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It has.
Filled with thought-provoking insights and challenging questions.
We've explored the historical roots of evangelical support.
We have.
The impact of the Gaza war.
Right.
The generational divide and the power of narratives.
We've heard from experts.
We have.
We've listened to firsthand accounts and delved into the complexities of this enduring conflict.
Absolutely. But most importantly, we've invited you, our listener, to join the conversation, to engage with the material, and to form your own conclusions.
Remember, the journey doesn't end here.
Right.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving for a deeper understanding.
Absolutely. And here's something to ponder as you go.
Okay.
Is American support for Israel truly unshakable? Or is it built on a theological foundation that could crumble?
Wow.
That's the question I want you to wrestle with. Okay.
Because the answer may very well determine the future of the Middle East.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep seeking the truth.
And keep diving deep.